Truth is elusive. The following program might shock and anger you. But don't believe anything you see or hear on this program or any others. Research it yourself to verify its validity. This is the age of deception. I'm not here to entertain you. You have 60 other channels to do that, to keep you numbed down and dumbed down. Your life is an illusion.
About 6 weeks ago, I got out of bed an extra hour early, which means I got up at 2 instead of 3 to run to Grand Rapids. And I got to Grand Rapids because I said to myself, you're going to meet somebody that you don't know before, and it might be just the person you need to meet. And I got down to the Marriott Courtyard hour and a half before a seminar, and I walked into the lobby, and there's a lady standing there like this, and I walked up and I said, are you going to the seminar? She goes, yes. She goes, I go, you waiting for somebody? She says, I think so. And I said, well, that's me. Let's go have breakfast. And we went into this restaurant, and we had this waiter come up, and we says, do you use real eggs and real butter? He says, well, yeah, we got real eggs. I seen them crack them, but we use margarine. I says, darn, you'll have to call an ambulance because I'm allergic to that stuff if you feed it to me. Maybe we'll just go somewhere else. He says, they've got butter. I'll make sure that it gets done. So they brought us this real nice breakfast, and he gets this panicked look on his face, and he grabs the plate of toast right out from underneath us, and he says, that was margarine. I didn't want to call the ambulance. And he comes back with our toast, and we tipped him very well for being rude because we said, are you sure that those eggs came from a chicken? I seen him cracking myself, and I says, you got a hen house full of sick chickens, sir. I do believe in organic farming. Chuck Walters is the founder and executive editor of Acres USA. I met him quite by mistake. I live in northern Michigan, and one of the biggest producers of revenue in northern Michigan is chopping down all of our trees and making things like pallets. And as a byproduct, there's slab wood, and I heat my house with wood. I was chasing down some wood on a Sunday morning, and everything that could go wrong went wrong to have me standing at the side of the road hitchhiking. Well, I get into a vehicle that a car stopped. It was the first one, and it was two gentlemen that were going to, as they put it, an organic beef farm, grass-fed. And I says, gosh, I'd love to eat a steak. I'd be getting all my fatty omega-9s and 12s, and you can forget the 6s and the arthritis pain. I only knew these guys maybe a minute and a half now, and the driver puts his head forward and says, well, this guy's an expert. And I said, what's he an expert at, sir? And he says, he's a beef geneticist. And I said, well, I'm a genetic researcher. Would you like to stop at my office? And he says, well, where are we going? I said, town. Of course, in northern Michigan, when you live by a town, that's where you go, is town. And he said, well, what town is it? And I said, Hillman. And I'm from Hillman, Michigan. And he looks at the map and he says, yep, that's where we're going next. And I says, well, would you like to come in my office? I've got all my research material, just happened to be ready to tell you about it. And he says, well, we got to go to this farm. Got about 5 minutes to spare. After 3 hours of talking with this gentleman, the one gentleman says, what are you doing with your research? And I says, I've been on an intellectual high just realizing this. And I said, I've been on one knee praying for 5 years. I have no idea how to get this information out. He says, you need to put this information in the hands of the farmer. And I says, well, that's a grassroots idea. He says, if the farmers can't grow good food, how can you expect to consume it? I says, that's fair game with me. And he says, well, we got to get you and Chuck in touch with Chuck Walters. And I go, who's he? And he goes, well, he's the publisher of Acres Magazine. And I go, what's Acres Magazine? I was oblivious, and it turns out this is the Cadillac of organic farming magazines. So the next day I get a call from Chuck Walters. He says, hi, I'm Chuck Walters. I'm blind, and I have to record everything we say because I have to go over it. Do you mind? I says, no. So he started asking me a few questions, and he says, well, we got to stop now. And I thought maybe 10, 15 minutes had passed, and he says, well, you've been talking to me for an hour and a half. And he says, what are you doing with this information? And I says, not a lot yet. He says, well, I'm going to write a book and publish it, and you're going to help me. And I says, well, I'm game for that. And it took us about a year and a half, and we come up with the book called Minerals for Tumor Suppressing Genes. Now, Minerals for Tumor Suppressing Genes is a book that's used to describe what minerals in relationship to what amino acids that are the building blocks of protein are needed to create a three-dimensional protein. And in this book, we describe chemical properties that affiliate with minerals that have electrical charge. And many minerals have multiple electric charges, and in the book I define what minerals you need to have that proper charge. Now, when I start speeches, I'm always very nervous. And here is a picture of where I'm not very nervous at all. This is approximately 500 miles into Canada, and I have a cottage on a lake, and this is the only cottage on a lake that's 4 miles long. And there's the kind of fish that you catch, and I know I'm not a vegetarian. I do like fish occasionally. These are a couple of doctors that quite time go up there frequently with me, and the one looking at us is from Florida, and he's an iridologist, and the gentleman below him is a vitamin representative from Professional Health Products, and he wanted to go up and try to sell his products, and all we did is fish. And when we fish, we cook up this amount of fish at one meal when we're up there. These are basically all organic walleye. And my residents on this lake are moose and caribou. And the only way you can get to this cottage is with that mode of transportation right there. The first book I have out, which is available for your entertainment, and this is strictly entertainment and relaxation and humor, has nothing to do with health, and I make no claims to have anybody derive any material from this book that has anything to do with healing or health. That's my disclaimer. Minerals for the Genetic Code, as I was describing, is the book that talks about what minerals are needed to make a three-dimensional structure. The second book, which is in the final stages, very final stages, I've said final stages for 9 months, but it's in the very final stages. It's called Minerals for Tumor Suppressing Genes. And tumor suppressing genes are your onboard protection not to get cancer. These genes are always supposed to be functioning, and if any of them go to sleep, whatever tumor suppressing gene fell asleep, you will get the associated cancer with that. The third book that I've got done, which I'm going to finish this summer after Minerals for Tumor Suppressing Genes is done, is called Minerals for Acupuncture Meridians. And there's ways of looking at body energy. Maybe somebody can stand there and say, my gosh, that's a nice turquoise aura you have, or intuitively know something about you. Other people can look at this as chakras and say, well, there's all these different levels of energy, and we relate to them as chakras. I relate the energy fields that I deal with as acupuncture energy meridians. And I attempt to explain why minerals are needed in what ratios, what amounts, what electron valences to create magnetic energy fields. Now, when I look at all this stuff and all the stuff I talk about, I try to talk about things in the context of a term coined by Albert Einstein called the Grand Unified Theory. This is the theory of everything, and I think DNA explains the theory of everything in terms of life. It has gravity, it has magnetism, it has weak and strong electrical forces. And when I look at magnetism, I look at the electron valence of a given mineral. An example of two minerals with an electron valence would be sodium chloride, such as table salt. Sodium has a positive 1 charge, chloride has a negative 1 charge. Positive ones and negative ones are attractive to each other. Positive 2, negative 2. These minerals all have their mate pairs. Male, female, night, day, right, left, up, down. Third law of physics. For every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I don't care how you want to look at it, but everything seems to have an opposite. And I have taken the acupuncture meridians and I break them down by minerals according to these electron valences. And I use the laws of acupuncture and I redefine them and say this mineral has this quality, this mineral has this quality. I won't get into that aspect of the speech today because it's out of the context of just talking about a basic understanding of minerals. And the last one, it says amino acids for acupuncture meridians. Well, that book is going to look identical to minerals, except I can just take the mineral out and put in the individual amino acid names and dress the cover up different. It's actually the same book because the minerals and the amino acids are paired up in the first book, Minerals for the Genetic Code. I live on a very beautiful lake. It's 112 foot deep. It's 325 acres big. The water comes out of the ground probably somewhere, I couldn't even put a gallon per minute on it, but it starts a river. It's felt that the water starts from south of the magnetic North Pole and feeds Higgins Lake, Avalon Lake, Torch Lake. I believe that's the really big lakes that you would identify in northern Michigan. The fish in our lake live 3 times as long. It's my speculation that the water bonding angles are in the neighborhood of 103 that slows down everything affiliated with DNA life forms. I like living there because in my mind, if I live there and drink this water, I might live longer. Now, what's unusual about this day, you'll see that my 16-year-old son has a hat on. Yes, indeed, it's 40 degrees. Our environment is undergoing assault that is not going to really straighten out in any time near future. Come around the 3rd weekend of November, our lake freezes. 2 years ago, this picture was taken January 8th. 8 weeks after the lake is supposed to freeze, we're out water skiing, and the lake thawed March 10th, which meant that this lake wasn't even froze over 60 days. This past winter, it was froze 5 months. Now, as farmers need to grow food for us to eat, it needs to have minerals so that the DNA is properly expressed. And we need the strongest representation of DNA expression to withstand water problems, air problems, weather problems. About 1/3 of the people in the United States thinks that vitamins and minerals are good, so they give it to their children. Where are the vitamins and minerals coming from? In the past 10 years, China has positioned itself to provide 98% of all the vitamins and minerals to the United States. And we're not talking organic. In an 8-year study that was done, that followed 8,000 people, this study said that if you take a multiple vitamin with selenium, you are 40% greater at risk of getting type 2 diabetes. And I said, well, they finally give a name to the wrong kind of selenium. Selenium has a dubious history. It has multiple oxidation states. It has multiple energy levels that God put on Earth. We need it to be in one form as a -2 form, and it also has to be attached to an amino acid called methionine, hence the word selenomethionine. But the body needs selenium so bad, it'll take any form it can get it, pack it into fat tissue, and wait till it can convert it to selenomethionine. So in 1952, selenium was called Factor X. In 1957, the World Health Organization said, you know, this is pretty darn important stuff. And our federal government, moving at the speed of light, said you can give it to your cattle in 1979. But they didn't know what the word organic meant, and I'm not sure that they do to this day. because organic selenium was not allowed to be given to cattle till the year 2000. And an example of not understanding selenium metabolism would be a disease in northern Michigan that I feel is propagated because of the wrong type of selenium. It's called bovine tuberculosis. We've been importing, and by importing, we've been bringing it in, putting it into the feed of our cows, and the cows have this mysterious way of pooing every day, and we don't know what to do with the poo, so we put it back on the fields. Now we got fields for almost 30 years, the inorganic sodium selenate covered. But it did wonders for the market. Birthing was a little better. The bacteria count in milk went down. They couldn't live without it. They can't live without it. We're taking a 20-second break here because the camera got disturbed. Okay, we're all set. Okay. But nobody took a look at the literature. And the literature says if you are trying to grow tuberculosis in a petri dish, it takes 12 days. If you add organic selenium, it doesn't grow. If you add sodium selenate, this stuff grows in 3 days and lots of it. And this abnormal use of this very powerful mineral in the wrong form is making it such that you can say that it's not a matter of when everything gets bovine tuberculosis, it's when are they going to actually get it. And the state of Michigan has all of our farms in northern Michigan under quarantine. I couldn't sell my neighbor across the street a cow without getting a permit, getting a blood test, and darn near having the Secret Service walk that cow across the street for me. And to make sure that they brought in the appropriate agencies to enforce this, the DNR has been enlisted to help ensure this. That's just an example of one mineral that we need desperately that's been given us to the wrong kind. And sodium selenate is the byproduct of the steel industry from China. Minerals for the genetic code. I have been working with minerals and the knowledge of subatomic particles since 1977. Magnesium is a very critical part to understanding how the body works in relation to minerals and genetics. When the sun hits the earth and turns everything luscious green like it's doing today, it's exciting the molecule called chlorophyll. And the center of the chlorophyll molecule is magnesium. And without magnesium, life is indispensable. And magnesium is the #1 mineral deficiency I see in practice and in life in general. The fastest way to run the magnesium out of your body, if you have it, is to not drink water. And I take a look at the water supply from this town here. It's coming from the city of Detroit. And the city of Detroit makes sure it's chlorinated, fluorinated, and last but not least, aluminum sulfated. That makes the water go from cloudy to clear. And fluorine is supposed to keep our children from having cavities. Unfortunately, it causes latent tooth eruption and all the teeth to be made with white spots. That controversy is all by itself. I am not a proponent of fluoride. But magnesium, I'm a massive proponent of. Everything that's this side of antimatter is matter, and matter is made of the smallest particles called quarks. And all the various ratios of quarks will determine what minerals there are, and DNA is the sorter of all minerals. DNA knows what frequency minerals oscillate at. It knows the shape. It knows what time of day to regenerate these minerals. It knows what acupuncture meridian it's supposed to charge up. It's for us to discover. DNA is doing it in every form of life that there is. The role of selenium in nutrition. For those of you who would like an absolute wonderful grounding in selenium, go to YouTube and type in selenium and nutrition. The guru of selenium in nutrition is Gerhard Schroeder. He's an elegant speaker. He lays out all the basic knowledge in 57 minutes that you will ever need to know on selenium. Selenium is found west of the Mississippi in the wrong form, and it's not found east of the Mississippi. The wrong forms of selenium have to be converted to the right forms into yeast condition. There's a question. Schroeder. Gerhard Schroeder. Just go to YouTube and type in selenium in nutrition, and at the very least, Ryan, we're going to try to rip that off, and I'm going to see if I can get permission to post it on my website for people to freely view. But it's freely viewable right now on YouTube, and type in selenium in nutrition. If you type in selenium, I believe there's 700 hits. When you type in selenium in nutrition, there's 1. Maybe 2, but you want to get Gerhard Schroeder. If you live east of the Mississippi, it's not in your soil. The second book, which I'm finishing up, is called Minerals for Tumor Suppressing Genes. The ultimate granddaddy of all tumor suppressing genes is called P53. And if you're writing stuff down, if you type in P53 and cancer, you will find that there are 900,000 hits. Everybody in the genetic fields knows that P53 has to work or you get cancer absolutely every single time. P53 don't work without selenomethionine. It's as simple as that. No selenium, no P53 activity. There's a selenium cycle in the human race. It goes from father, because the testicles place selenium on the head and the tail of a sperm. Sperm don't swim without selenium tails. Sperm don't penetrate eggs without selenium. The fertilized egg, the first thing it does is dissolve the head, dissolve the tail, recover the selenium, and then allows DNA to reassociate itself and make brand new chromatin. Don't happen without selenium. A, you don't get penetration, and B, you don't get fertility. Man gives it to women. Women reabsorb the selenium, dissolve it, and stores it in breast tissue, where it's there to protect against heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, mercury, arsenic, beryllium, barium. You can't get any of these heavy metals out of your system without having the proper form of selenium there. The book Atomic Suicide was written by Dr. Walter Russell and released in 1955, and it was his vision of the future as to the fallacies of digging rock up that was meant to be 5 miles underground, concentrating it, building nuclear reactors, and then saying we are smart enough to store radioactive material for 10 to 15,000 years. He just says leave it underground, let it do its job. Let the radiation underneath us dissolve the rock above it to create topsoil. But we don't do that. We've been dragging it out, concentrating it, and we're about ready to go to war over some country using it, whether it's Korea, North Korea, or Iraq, places that we don't want them to use radioactivity. In that book, we've got what's called the Russell Periodic Table. And those of you that are iridologists, that table is just waiting to be laid over the eye, which I've done. And it creates a brand new concept of iridology by taking the mineral chart and putting it in a circular motion.
Where does one get a hold of one?
Which one?
The Russell chart.
Just go to, the question is, where can one find the Walter Russell charts? You can go to my website and download them for nothing. My website is emineral.info. I've got on emineral.info a 4-hour DVD I did in Pennsylvania, and there are 2 or 3 1-hour speeches that I've given in the past. I try not to give the same speech twice. I always try to provide new and more updated information. My observations on the mineral chart, there's a pattern that repeats 9 times. Can everybody, is this chart visible in the back? Is it? Okay. Helium is a noble gas. It's a very happy, satisfied mineral. It doesn't want anything. It doesn't want to give up anything. It doesn't have electrons to share. You can't make it share electrons. If I had a piece of paper and I had a bunch of iron shavings, I can move that magnet and those iron shavings will follow it all around. That's a classical example of magnetism in full view. But there's lots of magnetism that work outside of just iron and a magnet. You're breathing helium, you're breathing argon, krypton, xenon, radon. You're breathing every one of these minerals right now. Are they having an effect on you? I think so. But because you can't go into a chemist's laboratory and say, well, we now have figured out the chemical reaction on how argon that does nothing works. It just, they don't have a chemical reaction. It's like saying, okay, chemistry teacher, I understand that lead and sulfur create this wonderful thing we call a car battery, but what happens when I stick that car battery on cement? Why does the thing go irreversibly dead overnight? I just shake their hand. I don't know. What are you talking about? That's not in the chemical equation. What's called magnetic induction. They finally figured out how these car batteries go irreversibly dead, and they put a little rubber mat or something on the bottom of these things so that cement don't take a battery and make it irreversibly dead. I think that these noble gases are what allows our thought process to control the activities of our DNA. Now, to go from a zero polarity noble gas to the next zero polarity noble gas, there's a pattern. +1, +2, +3, 4. And then the counterparts. -3, -2, -1, 0. And then that repeats again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. This does it 9 times, with the top 3 levels being our subatomic fields. Well, I didn't understand that.
I'm just wondering if you might want to point out the first part of it.
That's the last thing I point out. The question was to point out the top of the chart first, but you have to understand the bottom of the chart so I can explain the top part of the chart. Off on the right-hand side, you'll see a 0, and then there's a very big bar. Well, every time you see a bar, we're going to change polarities. And we're going to go from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. This is the 9th level of energy, and every mineral on that level is radioactive to DNA. You don't want anything to do with any of these. Those that have idiot tubes know, because the government puts in your face, check your basement, because radon gas is the 2nd leading cause of lung cancer. It's radioactive. Keep breathing it in, you're going to get some effects. If you take a look at a mineral called plutonium, and plutonium is just 2 electrons shy of radon, anybody that's been exposed to cigarette smoke's been exposed to plutonium-210. This is the radioactive mineral released from tobacco, and it has a 45-day half-life, meaning whatever you got in, half of it's there in 45 days, and half of that's there in 45 days, and half of it's there in 45 days. And that is the #1 cause of lung cancer. Cigarettes may have from 150 to 600 chemicals, but it's the radioactivity that's emitting alpha radiation that's breaking down all the DNA bonds. It causes single breaks, it causes double breaks. And it burns out your tumor-suppressing genes to the point that your body cannot overcome as many breaks or dismantle as many breaks as the radiation causes. And when you overwhelm your tumor suppressing genes to the lung and cells start to divide instead of naturally die, you've got cancer. I call it a chimney fire, too much smoke. Northern Michigan, you're more worried about a chimney fire than anything else. And when I get people that come in and they cough and hack, and I say, you still trying to get a chimney fire with them cigarettes? And they go, oh yeah, I guess so. Take one electron away from plutonium, and you can go to the drugstore and buy Pepto-Bismol. I call that Pepto-Dismol because when you have to start taking radioactive metals just to keep your poop chute working, you're in trouble. You have to get off that stuff, and you have to find out what happened to your electron transfer system, that your system would be so messed up that you've got to use a level 9 mineral. The rest of these you don't have to talk too much about. Lead, thallium, mercury. You'll notice gold is in there. You won't see gold on me. I think gold's biologically radioactive, but there's a reason that it doesn't affect the people like severe radiation. They put these minerals in an MRI machine, magnetic resonance imaging, and they can dial in the amount of energy they want, and they use 100 megahertz, which equals 1 for hydrogen, and they can tell where all these minerals have their peak amount of energy in terms of magnetic energy in megahertz. And the highest mineral we have in megahertz is fluorine, which oscillates at 94 megahertz, and gold oscillates at 1.3. So it doesn't have a tremendous amount of magnetic energy that it departs to you. If it does anything, it may just lower your frequencies a little bit, as opposed to keeping you where you need to be or expanding your energy levels. Now we're going to go from, on the right-hand side it says 0. We're going to go up to -1. This is level 8. And there's only one negative mineral, -1 mineral, in this level. This is iodine. Iodine has the most gravity. It has the most electrons surrounding the neutrons and protons. It has the greatest density. It controls all the negative ones on this chart, and it's stored in your thyroid, and your thyroid is the most important organ in the body, and if that's not working right, there isn't anything else that is going to be working right. Iodine. It don't get more important than iodine. So when I talk to people and they say, well, iodine, I go, yeah, you know, how often do you go to Red Lobster? Well, that's pretty expensive. How often do you go and buy a steak salmon, or how often do you eat tuna fish for that? Not many people eat a lot of it. You got to have 5 meals from the ocean, preferably greens. What kind of greens? Sea vegetables. The women of Okinawa have the lowest cancer rates in the world. 50% of their diet sea vegetables. The other 50 moved down to the island after they were kids. These minerals come from the ocean. Sea kelp knows how to sort this stuff out. It's been around since the oceans. Very important. You can go to your doctor and you can say, look, my thyroid is swelled up. I can't stand hot. I can't stand cold. I can't be warm. And they take your blood test and they go, there's nothing wrong. And you're surprised, but you're relieved at the same time. I would be surprised if they said it was normal, although because you are not proven to have a problem on your blood test, you're considered normal. How long do you got to wait before the blood test goes abnormal before they say, you know, you might have a goiter there. We should have done something 7 years ago. So look at your iodine levels, and potassium iodine is not your source of potassium. Iodized salt, they used to add it to everything. They added it to milk, they added it to everything. They used to have iodine tinctures when you scraped yourself. Where do you buy iodine now? You just don't, I mean, you have to go out of your way to get it. An inorganic form is potassium iodine. And if you handed me a multiple vitamin right now, I would say, what's the source of iodine? Does it say iodine from sea kelp? I'd say read on. If it says potassium iodine, I'd say that's it. We're all done. And if it says potassium iodine, it's done. If it says iodine from sea kelp, I go, okay, where's the selenium coming from? And if it says selenomethionine, at least I got enough intelligence to get the two most important minerals right. Most everything else is going to be okay. But when you see potassium iodine and sodium selenate in there, you're now talking about commonly bought, over-the-counter multiple vitamins that will have 3 forms of aluminum in it, because that's how they get the preservatives in there that gives it a 5-day shelf life. And sometimes they actually tell you it's aluminum, but most of the time it says FD&C, yellow, blue, or red, lake. Like Lake Huron or Lake Erie. If it has the word lake in the ingredient list, that's aluminum. And I also see such fun-loving compounds like ethylene glycol, which is antifreeze. I see polyvinyl chloride, which is plastic, in the ingredient list of the multiple vitamins. We need lanthanum. You can't grow a cucumber without it. Barium, well, we need maybe barium, but if you ever got it detected on you, you probably got too much. There's a few minerals here that I indicate we need, but if you get tested and find them, you probably have more than what you need. And barium would be one of them. The health-minded people have heard the expression, cesium, alkalize or die. I never really understood what the word alkalize or die means until I was researching P53. And P53 is just this absolute terrible gene because it kills everything in its wake. And the body has a way to keep this under lock and key. And every cell in your body has P53, and P53 is under lock and key with a gene called MDM2. They all got big fancy names. I don't take the time to remember that, but MDM2 is the lock and key to P53. Now, it's like a dance that never ends. P53 and MDM2 are stuck together until enough tumor-suppressing genes vote that P53 should tell the cell to commit suicide. And then there's a key to release it. And that key is USB7. And when I converted the protein sequence, I found out that cesium was the most important mineral to allow this uncoupling of MDM2 and P53. And I go, oh, so that's why we need this. And I pity the poor people that are so sick that only needed cesium to begin with, that do it, and all their cancer cells suddenly die, and their liver's overwhelmed, their kidneys are overwhelmed with all this dead material, and they perish because their elimination wasn't up to having that many cancer cells all die at once. So the best thing to do is to keep your body on the alkaline side. You'll always have your potassium, sodium, lithium, rubidium, and cesium levels in adequate amounts. So if you're a urine tester and a saliva tester, that's why you're doing it, is you're trying to keep it alkaline. Why? Because the ultimate alkalinity is cesium, and it releases the kraken to kill the cell if need be. We talked about iodine, and if you like beryllium, you like garlic. If you don't like to smell garlic, eat garlic with them, so neither one of you smell like beryllium, because that's what gives garlic breath its smell, is beryllium. Do we need it? Absolutely. See where it says beryllium is hooked up with a -2 oxidation state? It keeps the barium from building up in your body.
You don't have a pointer. Can you use that up on the slide?
No.
It would help people with focus.
Well, I'm doing my best. The next mineral, lighter than beryllium, is antimony. And if anybody knows where we can get an antimony supplement that was good and organic, let me know. Because I'm only going to tell you where you're getting it from, and you might not want it. Well, there's 15 antimony deposits in here. It's plastic. It's plastic bottles. It's water. We're finding antimony from the Arctic Circle to the Antarctic Circle and everywhere in between where people tinkle. They drag their water in plastic bottles, and this stuff leaches the antimony into it, and you drink it, and it goes through you. And we don't even know what the long-term effects of that is, because we haven't had this much antimony in man ever.
Is it all plastics, 1 through 7?
The only plastic you would conceive of running around with in your hand is plastic 6. Don't ever drink anything that's been microwaved. And what is opposite of 60 Minutes last Sunday was Dateline, or one of those shows on NBC, and they had a 20-minute segment on plastic and bottles. You know, they concentrated on bismuth A and bismuth B as hormone disruptors. Well, I'm just a mineral guy. I don't remember bismuth A and bismuth B. I remember antimony. And only plastic number 6 doesn't leach the antimony and the bismuth A and bismuth B into it. But they said in the television program, don't ever use your plastic bottles twice. When they start getting white is when they're really breaking down. Glass is safe as long as it ain't got lead in it. There's nothing safe in our world. We're just talking about a degree of hazard, a lessening of the potential. We moved up one level of energy, and the primary energy in this one is -2, and this is selenium. And selenomethionine, I want to say it again, selenomethionine is what you want to consume, and you can consume a lot of it without it being toxic. Your body will use it, lose it. When it loses, it will take lead, mercury, cadmium, and some arsenic with it. Right next to selenium is arsenic. The largest poisoning on Earth occurred in Bangladesh. The World Health Organization went in there 32 years ago and says, you know, you only have 2 and 5 children make it to 5 years old. Y'all wash in the river, y'all take your animals in the river, and you get your drinking water from the river, and it's polluted. Here is a pounder, here's a pint, and here's a pump. And they went and bought 30 million people, pumps, pipes, and wells. Nobody checked the water. It's the largest arsenic basin in the world. It's a petri dish gone bad because it's the real thing. So 30 years later, they go back and they go, well, you're dying of arsenic poisoning, you're dying of arsenic cancer, you're dying of this. Well, you're not dying and you're drinking the same water. What's wrong with this guy? He's not dying. And it turned out to be folic acid and vitamin B and selenium. Folic acid and selenium were the 2 things that people had in their system that kept the arsenic going through their system, not settling into them, raising havoc with the system. Now, is arsenic necessary? Absolutely. When a woman conceives a boy at the end of the first trimester, if she is arsenic deficient, she will lose the child every time. Because it takes the bloodstream in a female that's pregnant for a boy has to go up tenfold, the blood. Courtesy of Playboy magazine, I was reading it that day. They tell you if you want to increase your chances of having a boy, eat perch fish. Now in my neck of the woods, we have got what's called northern pines. And if I have a woman that is into spontaneous abortion, at the end of the first trimester, we get 4 or 5 fresh pine needles, cut them up, put them into boiling water, set them 20 minutes, and that's enough arsenic for the next 5 years. That's organic. For those of you that know what phycogenol is, this is a pine extract that will have trace amounts of arsenic in it. We're going to move down one, and we're going to talk about bromine. Now, those of you that know who osteopath up Bloomfield Hills, big iodine guy, just wrote a Brownstein, Dr. Brownstein, you know, a lot of research on iodine. Well, the fastest way to get iodine out of your body is to consume bromine. It's that simple. But do we need bromine? Absolutely. Anybody that has a true case of Parkinson's, their brain is without bromine. And what are all the Parkinson drugs based on? Bromine. They're trying to push that bromine back into the brain. Kind of on a global effect for a real local problem. But the bromine, and half this crowd would remember the word bromoseltzer. Wonderful stuff. Took the edge off your nerves. Also got you a little bit high too. Go out and drink all night and wake up and get high in the morning. Sounds like today. They took bromo seltzer off the market because people got gallbladder cancer, schizophrenia, a lot of suicides. They run all the iodine out of the brain, out of the system, made them hypothyroid. But bromine has crept back into the food chain in a very insidious way. If you see any pops that are green, that's bromine. You see red pops, that's bromine. You see ruby red. All these pops state right on there what's in there. It says bromated vegetable oil. And kids love it. They can be schizophrenic for a reason. They can all hang out on the same frequency. Iodine deficient, bromine toxic. They can talk about all the bad things that they do. What startled me was the amount of bromine that's used in bread. At the turn of the century, we all knew we needed iodine. The makers put iodine in the food. We got to get rid of these goiters. So iodine was added to bread. Well, they found out you take the iodine out when your bread cools, you got a big hole in the top of it. And apparently that inconveniences enough people that they went and stuck bromine in the bread instead of iodine, because when the bread cools, by golly, there's no hole in the top of it. So now all of the white flour in America sold is bromated. I have a lady that has a restaurant right next to me, and she's a very God-fearing woman, and her back was really bad, and people listen to you when they're in pain. And I said, well, are you using bromated bread? You know, and I tell her the whole thing I just told you, and she'd come back and she says, Richie, I'm so happy to tell you I'm not using bromated bread. And I go, I don't believe this. I've got to see it so I can be happy with you. And we go over to the store and we're looking at the nutritional box, and it's got A, C, D, niacin, I'm like, my gosh, that's amazing. Right above it in blue, you couldn't even read it, it said bromated. It took me 5 minutes to see those letters on the bag. It stretched from one end of the bag to the other, and it was listed above nutritional information. So that tells me they don't think bromine is nutritionally related. It's just in there. They took the iodine out to put the bromine in. The bromine runs the iodine out of the body, but nobody puts the iodine back in. If you live within 3 miles of an ocean, who worries about iodine? It's in the air and you breathe it. If you live in Detroit, you breathe the air. Does it got iodine? I don't think so. Rubidium, a very wonderful mineral. If you know anybody that's bipolar taking lithium, tell them about rubidium. If you know anybody that's on lithium for depression, they need to learn about rubidium. You're supposedly about 380 milligrams of rubidium in every body that's normal. When rubidium gets low, lithium tends to lock itself up and doesn't mobilize. When you give people organic rubidium, it's usually 100 micrograms a day. It follows the same path chemicals as potassium, and it mobilizes lithium. I have a lady that went from 1,200 milligrams of lithium a day to just keep her slightly catatonic to 200 milligrams of lithium, and as normal as anybody I've seen in 60 days. It's that powerful, it's that potent, it's that much needed. Rubidium, you get it from radish skins. That's why radish skins are partly red. Question?
So you're saying if somebody is on lithium therapy,
Lithium carbonate therapy,
they should be getting rubidium.
they need to get on rubidium because they can under supervision, remember this is only for your entertainment that I'm talking about, under supervision can drastically lower their lithium levels. When you take this amount of lithium, you're constantly under the auspice of the lab because you're just waiting for your liver to go bad. Question?
What kind of skin you get that from?
Radishes.
Radish skin?
In the book Minerals for the Genetic Code, every mineral I talk about, we have a plant or tree source. And I didn't do the work. Dr. James Duke, a very famous guy in this field, We got his written permission to publicize it. And he's got a website. You can type James Duke, and he's got you can do all the queries you want. I did the queries on the individual minerals, and that's what we have in the book, by the parts per million. Hmm? Well, I could look it up and do research. And the question was about a particular type of radish, and I don't know the radish he's talking about. But rubidium is very important to realize when you have people that have got themselves into problems with depression. There's usually a lithium imbalance in relation to rubidium. And the only way I can explain the way this works is rubidium is a +1 mineral, lithium is a +1 mineral, and think of these as two +1 magnets. And when you take magnets of like a kind and put them together, they repel. But when this rubidium goes in, it puts into function the lithium that's already there. Nobody's done an autopsy and says these things are so low unless they commit suicide. People that have that auto-terminate normally have very low lithium levels, but there's a ton of bipolar people out there that have adequate amounts of lithium. They're just lacking rubidium. Next question.
So the rubidium is recycling the lithium.
Yeah.
And well, now if you're saying the lithium gets caught in the liver, right? Will the rubidium then cause the lithium to be cycled out of the liver?
Rubidium is going to be cycled out of the spleen. Lithium gets cycled out of the spleen. It may end up in the toilet via the liver, but its detoxification pathways are going to go through the lymphatic system, and it's going to end up in the spleen. Because every one of these minerals has a profound effect on an acupuncture meridian, and lithium and rubidium fall on the spleen meridian. Whereas potassium falls on the liver meridian, and people that have got an extensive history of some form of poisoning, toxic, drug abuse, where they've really got their liver cells messed up and their potassium's not working right. This is where the secondary effect of messing up with one +1 mineral has other effects on other +1 minerals. If you give somebody a ton of lithium, what you're looking for is the potassium levels to bottom right out. And then when the potassium levels bottom out, they get liver damage. So there's a constant surveillance of the blood, making sure that the liver damage isn't occurring from real low potassium levels. And these minerals have to be in the right balance. If you want to know more on lithium and brain regeneration, type in Jonathan Wright out of Seattle, Washington. I got about a 6-page article on brain regeneration and the importance of lithium.
W-R-I-T.
Yeah, Jonathan Wright. All right, the mineral right underneath strontium is strontium, which is 1 electron higher than rubidium. And when you're talking strontium, we're not talking strontium-90 as in fallout from nuclear blast. I'm making you understand that that is a mineral. When you blow a nuclear bomb up, you'll get it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the mineral strontium. And when you have a stem cell that's either going to become cartilage or bone, if you have rubidium present, it'll go to bone every time. If the rubidium stores in your body are below 280 milligrams, it's going to go to cartilage. And the result is called osteoporosis. You have to have strontium present to regenerate your bone structure. A lot of older women pick up and take Sally Field pills. And the classification of these pills are called biophosphates. And one of the hideous side effects of biophosphates is all your teeth fall out. Can't be the healthiest stuff in the world if your teeth fall out. Now, my idea of going to a doctor and says your bones are weak, we're going to have to build you up. That's my concept. Biophosphates do nothing to build you up. The mechanism of bone regeneration is bone turnover. You have bones that make bones, and you have bone cells that break bones down. And your cells are breaking bones down no faster than they did the day before. You're just not making them as fast as you're breaking them down. So biophosphates don't enhance, they don't make cells work better that create bone. It kills the cells that breaks them down. It's chemotoxic for bone cells. So if you kill all the cells that break bones down, and the other ones are kind of nutritionally deficient, they keep chugging along, over a period of time you can have yourself a bone density that says, look, I'm getting better. But I've had to kill all of my cells that break bones down to do it. Got a 5-year rate on that. After 5 years, you've now got osteoporosis, very brittle, and you've killed every cell that breaks them down, or at least the majority of them. Now you have to get better, you have to make more bone cells, and you have to regenerate the bone cells that break bones down in order to keep living for a while. Doesn't make much sense to me. Question?
Bone density, how does that fit in?
The question is, how does bone density fit in? There's a lot of things that it takes. We're going to talk about what it takes to have good bone density. First of all, you have to have a stomach that works. Has to make a lot of hydrochloric acid. Has to be able to digest all of the following products: calcium, magnesium, strontium, vitamin D3, vitamin B12, vanadium, and silica. All have to be present in the whole process of making a bone cell, breaking it down, bringing the raw material in, and excreting the bad stuff. Got to have all of these. It's not how much calcium a person can gobble down, because they say Tums is good for my osteoporosis. I got a stomach ache to begin with, it doesn't work. They use the calcium to mop up what little stomach acid you have, and the whole cycle of events just doesn't allow for the propagation of bone cells. And I do take into account that there are hormonal differences between male and men, and that osteoporosis is so common in women that when I get reports, they go, well, that's just a normal variation. Yet if the woman bent over with a basket of wet laundry, she might break a bone, and the report mentions nothing. And their comment is, well, that's a normal variation. If you think she's got osteoporosis, give us another $1,000 for a bone density test. Well, I certainly don't need to spend another $1,000 when I got an x-ray that already tells me the bone density is extremely low. So strontium is available, and it is necessary, but it's got to be in conjunction with all the other minerals needed. I'm wiggling my twine there on a mineral called yttrium. And yttrium is a fascinating mineral, at least to my standards, and it takes a lot to fascinate me. When I figured out where yttrium was being used in the body, I was in disbelief for 2 years that I might have made a discovery nobody else did. But when I started to see how this fits together, it started to make more sense. And I'll explain to you what I see, and if it makes sense to you, great. If it don't, remember, this is just for entertainment. Chaim T. Horowitz has got a book out. If he's still alive, he's got to be 98 years old now, out of Israel. He wrote a book called Scandium and Yttrium and the Biological Process. And in that book, they talk about giving their favorite lab animals shots of yttrium chloride, the same place every day, day after day after day after day. And to their utter surprise, they got no redness. The dogs didn't get sick. They didn't get ill. The dang dogs lived 3 times their normal lifespan. But all the yttrium ended up in the poop chute. Didn't come out their lungs like beryllium. It didn't come out their skin. They didn't get boils. It all ended up in fecal material, and I had to figure out why the body would shuttle all this stuff into the alimentary canal. It took me a long time to figure it out, but what I came up with was the opposite of an antibiotic is a probiotic, and most everybody in here knows what a probiotic is. And I took a look at the genetic sequences of all the probiotics that have been genetically sequenced. So I started off with Acidophilus. And I go, well, is this the one? And I get my genetic sequence going, and I hit the button, and lo and behold, aluminum is the most important mineral for Acidophilus. And I was so disappointed to see the aluminum at the top. I sat back and said, well, you know, how many of these bacteria has evolved on Earth? Well, how about all of them? And aluminum is the 3rd or 4th most abundant element in the crust of the Earth. And I did all of them that I come across, and aluminum,